This is an ABC podcast.
You're listening to The Country Hour on ABC Radio South Australia and Broken Hill.
Hello there, Nikolai Balehart's with you for another week of The Country Hour. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, rainfall. I'm very keen to know how much rain you've had over the course of the weekend, but also what it means to you. Is this the break or is it not quite enough? You can send us a text, 0467 922 891. How much rain have you had, or did you miss out? The text line, 0467 922 891. Also today, movement restrictions for fruit in a number of fruit fly outbreak areas in the Riverland have now been extended out to December after more larvae was found. We'll find out what this means for the citrus harvest. To start today, though, for many parts of the broader agricultural industry, it's a pretty good time to be in business at the moment. Indeed, a little later on, we'll hear more about the spending spree that some farmers have been on when it comes to new machinery. But the National Farmers Federation believes with a little help from tomorrow's federal budget, it could be even better. Here's NFF Chief Executive Tony Marr.
We can really turbo boost the economy by, getting some support, fiscal support for things like, trade disruptions. We're an export-orientated industry. We'll always need to partner with government to continue to develop export markets. Biosecurity, sure, there was some funding for biosecurity, and that is great, really welcome. But we need, a long-term funding model and some reform of the systems in terms of roles and responsibilities. So there's certainly a lot that we can partner with from a government perspective.
Okay, just on the biosecurity funding, of course, David Littleproud, when he was first Agriculture Minister, used a federal budget to announce a levy on inbound freight, something that the National Farmers Federation had supported. Of course, that had to be axed before it ever got off the ground, but basically that would have raised a similar amount of funding as to what we saw announced by the Prime Minister at Beef last week. Are you a bit disappointed that we don't have that levy in place at this time?
Well, we're pleased that they've committed to almost what we've asked for is $100 million, so 300 over 4 years, so 371 over 4 is close to the mark there. So that's a really good start. But we do have to have a long-term funding model for the most critical part of agriculture in Australia, and that is pest and disease-free status.
Do you believe that a levy would do that? Would you still like to see that introduced?
We've always thought we don't really care where the cash comes from, whether it's a levy or something else. We supported the levy. Now, if the levy's not there and got close to what it was going to bring in anyway, that's a good start. It's up to government to allocate where the cash comes from. The point is that the money's there, and that's one part of the solution to the biosecurity challenges that face us.
Do you understand what the funding, I think it was more than $60 million as part of this biosecurity announcement for an animal surveillance program for Australia's animal sectors? Do you have any more detail on that?
I haven't, but I suspect it's got a lot to do with feral pig population, African swine fever, those sorts of things, which, again, we're very supportive of.
And on trade, the National Farmers Federation estimates the cost of disruption to trade with China over the past, 12 months it is now, is close to $40 billion over the next decade. How do you think the federal government should go about addressing that issue in this federal budget?
Well, the key thing that they can do is to work closely with industry and make sure they're clear on where the opportunities are and what's needed. So whether it's non-tariff barriers, whether it's technical barriers, whether it's tariffs or quotas or those sorts of things, and where the huge opportunities are. We know they're all around the globe. So the key thing that they have to do is to work in partnership with industry.
One exporter I was speaking to recently said it's not an issue about market diversification. We sell into a lot of different markets. It's just that those other markets don't pay as much as what China would. How do you address something like that?
Well, I think that's right. There's Australian food and fibre goes into many countries all over the world and has done for a long time. Of course, there's going to be peaks and troughs in markets, and that's a given. So we have to look for whether it's China or any other market where the best opportunities are, and that'll suit some producers for some products and other producers for others. So it's about having a really wide lens for market opportunities in the trade space.
That is Tony Maher from the National Farmers Federation, speaking there with Kath Sullivan. And as we heard, there was a fair bit of discussion there about some of those newer export markets. Well, Australia's beef exports to the Philippines have had a huge jump in the past 2 months as African swine fever continues to devastate that country's pig herd. Mecardo's Adrian Ladaniewski says the disease gives the Australian beef industry a bit of a chance to try and give the Philippines' growing middle class a taste for beef. However, he told Lucas Forbes, attempts by the Philippine government to deal with the rising price of pork could end the beef industry's rise in exports just as it's beginning.
It's been quite an intense impact there, Lucas. They've lost over 3 million pigs in the last year, which is 25% of their herd. And a lot of that's actually come from the commercial piggery side of the industry as well.
So we've heard from China there have been signs of rebuilding, but there have also been many people who said that China obviously isn't rebuilding, it's still in crisis. What do we know about the Philippines? Is this situation with the ASF getting better or worse? Keep staying the same? What's going on?
So I think that the situation is probably quite tense there at the moment. The commercial piggery industry has actually de-risked and de-stocked a lot of their facilities. And some of the backyard producers also have been actually converting their back garden dyes into different enterprises such as horticulture or even fish farming if they can afford it. So there's a lot of fear there about losing substantial amounts of money in the pig industry at the moment.
What are the implications for Australia's beef exports to the Philippines as a result of that?
In the last couple of months, Lucas, in March and April, beef exports have actually gone up over 100% on a monthly basis, up to over 3.5 kilotons in March, and about 2.7 in April. So this has been an unprecedented rise in beef imports into the Philippines from Australia. It's been very positive for Australian producers currently.
I know it's hard to tell the future, but I mean, considering this is just for seems to be due to the ASF, is this just a flash in a pan for Australia's beef exports to the Philippines?
I think at this stage, it'll probably be a bit more of a temporary measure, and once the Philippines does sort out the situation and they start to rebuild their herd, I would expect that these increased levels of beef export into the Philippines from Australia just to reduce, and probably quite dramatically. However, this increased consumption of beef by especially the affluent consumers within the Philippines actually may flow through to more sustained demand within the country going forward. And that's backed up also by increases in expectations of increases in incomes in the Philippines over the next few years.
And I understand that the Philippines government is considering raising its current pork import quota from 54 kilotons to 400 kilotons in an attempt to keep pork prices under control. If that measure is passed to expand the import quotas, will that essentially end Australia's rise in beef exports to the Philippines?
Yes, Lucas. I think it's very likely that if the quota increase does go through, that'll result in a flood of cheaper pork coming into the Philippines at low tariff rates. They'll bring the pork price down, and the differential between beef prices and pork will widen again. So the market for Australia, the demand for Australian beef will definitely reduce as a result of that.
I suppose from your conversations in the industry, how does the Australian industry really see the future of Southeast Asia and a lot of countries around there? Because right now the Philippines does not make up a lot of Australia's beef exports, but it seems that there is a bit of interest in using this time to get more customers in those areas.
Because as incomes have tipped to increase quite substantially within the developing world in Southeast Asia, and beef is definitely on the menu. So going forward, I think that's definitely going to continue to be an area of growth for Australian beef exports.
That's Mecardo's Adrian Ladaniewski speaking there with Lucas Forbes.
You're listening to Nikolai Balehartz on ABC Radio South Australia and Broken Hill.
It is 14 past 12. Movement restrictions for fruit in multiple fruit fly outbreak areas in the Riverland have now been extended out to December after more larvae have been found. So far, 18,000 sterile fruit fly have been released as part of the fruit fly eradication plan. Minister for Primary Industries and Regional Development David Basham told Anita Ward PIRSA is working with industry to try and combat the outbreaks.
We still have a number of outbreaks in the Riverland, and we're still sadly seeing some detections of both flies and larvae occurring in the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, the season is not helping us, that we're not heading into those cold nights and things that are leading to the dormancy of the fruit fly. So we are still seeing a bit of activity.
So in terms of the outbreak zones, have there been any new detections or spreading of fruit fly, in those last couple of weeks?
So there have been detections within those zones in the last few weeks, yes. And unfortunately, that just means slight extensions to the exit dates at this point of this time of the year. There's not huge increases in timeframes, but it does mean that we're still not seeing the no activity is where we need to get to.
So which outbreak zones have been impacted and when are those extension dates until now?
Most recent, certainly Renmark West is the most recent one that I'm aware of. And it just brings into mid-December is when these will be released. As I said, at this time of the year, as we're going through the winter dormancy of calculations of the timeframes into zones, that those dates don't shift significantly at this time of year. With further detections.
So in terms of sterile fruit fly releases, that's one of the methods that the state is using to try and get it under control. How many have been done in the Riverland now?
Yeah, there's been about 18 million sit flies released over the Riverland in the outbreaks there. We've had those 4 outbreaks in the area, and to get those 80 million flies out there, it is a numbers game. It's very much making sure that there are a lot more sterile fruit flies out there, that if they have a chance of running into a female fly by just sheer numbers, they're more likely to run into a sterile one.
Is this proving to be an effective method?
I think it's a very important tool in this program of getting on top of the fruit fly and eradicating them. It's not the only thing that we're using. It's certainly just one of the methods. It's certainly the most recent method that's available to us in relation to fruit fly control at a level. But it is also very important, the on-ground work that's still going on out there, putting the baits out and making sure that we do some of the traditional work as well.
Minister, there's a push from local growers to have pre-harvest baiting recognised as adequate treatment for fruit travelling in and out of the suspension zones. What's the latest on this?
So this is very much a technical issue, working with the Commonwealth to find solutions to what our international trading partners will and won't accept. So it's a conversation that's certainly much happening at very high levels between the federal government, industry and the state government, trying to find what we can and can't do that will meet the requirements of our trading partners.
And have you had any further discussions or anything you can bring to the growers for new information?
Not at this stage. I mean, we're still in discussions trying to resolve this issue to make sure that we actually have a suitable outcome for growers, that we do have a viable option going forward.
How long are the negotiations, particularly on ICA 28 for citrus and ICA 21 for stone fruit, likely to take?
As I said, it's very much a conversation with the federal government and international trading partners' requirements. We have to find that solution for them, and certainly we're doing what we can in this space.
That is the Minister for Primary Industries and Regional Development, David Basham, speaking there with Anita Ward. 12 here on the Country Hour. My name's Nikolai Balehartz. Well, there's been a call for community-based fishers to be given a guaranteed allocation under Australia's fishery quota system. The call comes from the Australian Marine Conservation Society in a submission to a Senate inquiry looking into the quota system. Sustainable Seafood Program Manager Adrian Meader says the financial clout of corporate fishing companies is continuing to grow. He also says smaller community-based fishers tend to give greater benefit to coastal communities and be more environmentally friendly.
When we see challenges in the fishing industry, and there's plenty of those happening now in places like South Australia, but everywhere, often that can be an investment opportunity for bigger businesses. And often the actual ownership of a fishery gets concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, bigger players. And, that can be a good thing in some ways because, some of that can be easier to manage. But there can be real problems as well, because those small-scale community fishers might be fishing for different reasons. And they might be fishing and thinking of, say, their grandchildren and having a business and a healthy coastline and a healthy fishery resource that they hope to pass on one day. And that might be a very different motivation to, say, a very large business owning those fishing rights and thinking about the shareholders they need to report to and their requirements to, deliver profits in the shorter term. So that's where we're going from with our concerns for small fishing communities. And increasingly in fisheries around Australia, when quota fishery management is introduced, which is a form of sort of explicit ownership of a right to fish, we do tend to see that ownership being concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and often those hands tend to be further and further away from local communities that historically were sustained or had, important small local fishing businesses that were part of that community more directly.
Now, can I just clarify, when you say community fishers, you actually mean existing fishers? I mean, you don't mean, a community group, for example, could get a quota, or do you?
Yeah. Well, that can be. Fisheries in Australia have been managed as cooperatives for a long time, which is a group of small guys. But we're talking the small owners, the guys that own the vessels, the deckhands on those vessels. Those people tend to come from local coastal communities that are spread through regional areas right around Australia. And, fishing is a really important source of income for those smaller communities.
But don't those people already have quotas? In South Australia, we're moving to a new transferable quota system. Don't those people inherently already have quotas, or are you proposing some sort of different model?
Not necessarily. So under this process, many of those fishers will be awarded some quotas, sure. But we tend to see time and time again that ownership actually leave those communities and go into bigger and bigger hands. Now, it's complex. It's certainly complex. In parts of South Australia, Port Lincoln, for example, is one of the few areas where you do have very large fishing businesses that are directly part of those communities. And that situation certainly exists. But you also will see a bunch of small players. And while we're interested in that is from what are the environmental consequences of that? And we believe strongly that while on the other hand, there's very real environmental damage that can occur when there are too many fishers chasing too few fish. On the other side of that, if the only owners of that fishery resource that are left don't have a long-term stake, a multi-generational stake in the health of their local marine environment, then they can be fishing for the wrong reasons too. And we want to ensure that this inquiry is alive and aware of those concerns, and also of the value of the, maybe slightly more difficult to manage, maybe slightly less economically efficient, but incredibly socially important and, in some ways environmentally important maintenance of a real multi-generational stake for local regional communities in their local fishery resources.
So you're not talking about reinventing the wheel, you're talking about tweaking the existing arrangements to favour those community-based, those small-time fishers who may be falling victim to the bigger multinationals. Is that fair enough?
Exactly. And look, if you were a deckhand on one of these fishing vessels, you might dream of owning a boat and owning some of that quota someday. And look, in a whole range of fisheries around Australia, that's increasingly impossible because the actual ownership, especially of some of our more valuable fisheries, tends to be held by big businesses with a heck of a lot more buying power than is present in those small communities. And that means those deckhands will never be able to have that stewardship that comes from direct ownership and a real stake in the fishery. They're simply just going out and fishing according to someone else's orders, and that's going to be their career. And, in many ways, that is a shame socially, but also there can be some environmental consequences to that. And that's what our organisation is concerned about there.
That's Australian Marine Conservation Society Sustainable Seafood Program Manager Adrian Meter speaking there with Tim Jeans. It's just coming up to 25 past 12 on the Country Hour. That means it's time to find out what's happening weather-wise. Tom Bowick is on duty at the Bureau of Meteorology. Afternoon, Tom.
Hello, Nikolai.
We did see that band of rain make its way across at least part of the state. How did people fare?
Yeah, okay. Well, as is always the case, it was sort of variable. But we did get some showers developing already ahead of the front, which was over the sort of southern coastal areas in the early hours of the morning, and now has moved relatively far north and is into the sort of just into the southern parts of the pastoral districts, with winds having sort of shifted round to west-southwesterly behind the front there. And as far as rainfall totals go, look, generally there was about 5 to 15 millimetres for the southern agricultural area. Mostly falls were in the 1 to 2 millimetre range in the northern agricultural area, with perhaps a little bit more if you're in the mid-north. I think Port Pirie had sort of 3 or 4 millimetres. But your Riverland looks like only sort of less than a millimetre through that area. Highest falls 19 millimetres in the Mount Lofty Ranges at Wollonga. Also at your Radar and Lenswood, they both had 19 millimetres as well. Now, looking for the rest of the day and for the next week to come, at the moment there is still showers over the agricultural area following the front in the southwest to southerly airstream, so there's still a little bit of shower activity associated with that airstream. The showers are a bit more spaced now, but they are still around. And as we move into the later part of the day, the atmosphere will be drying somewhat, so by the time we get to the later part of the afternoon, the showers will be contracted southwards. So, should be in the evening just confined to the sort of southern coasts, and it'll be a cool evening with moderate to fresh southwest to southerly winds. For Tuesday, possibly some early fog patches in the far northwest there, in the higher ground, northwest of Coober Pedy there. But as far as any showers go, not many around. The atmosphere will be somewhat dry. There's just a slight chance of a shower near the Gulf coasts there, the southern coasts, and also the southern Mount Lofty Ranges. It should be a cool day, grading to mild in the far north. Now into Wednesday then, we're going to be having a high pressure system coming in behind this front, and by Wednesday that system will be sort of moving out into the Tasman Sea area, and there'll be a sort of a high pressure ridge over our state, which will see some fairly light winds, and combined with some clearing skies, there'll be a cold morning on Wednesday, so likely to be some areas of frost to the agricultural area and the south of the pastoral districts on Wednesday morning, so look out for a cold morning there. Then it'll be followed by a cool to mild and mostly sunny day with mostly light southeast to northeasterly winds. Then on Thursday, starting off with another cool to cold morning with some possible frost and isolated fog patches for parts of the agricultural area in the far south of the pastoral districts. But then we do have another cold front which is expected near the southern coast in the morning. And that front will be extending northwards to reach the northern agricultural area in the mid to late afternoon. As far as showers go, we're expecting with the front a slight to medium chance of showers developing with that front over the northern agricultural area and near the western coasts, increasing up to a high chance of showers for the southern agricultural area. Generally, temperatures cool grading to mild in the far north, and the winds will be light to moderate northwest to southwesterly, but they'll be freshening in the south during the day with the frontal system. Then on Friday, the airstream following the front will still see a slight to medium chance of showers for the agricultural area. Should be mostly in the south, however, and probably a bit more likely in the southeast there. The outlook Saturday, Sunday, Monday, continuing with the high pressure ridge over the area, give us an onshore airstream, so a slight to medium chance of showers for the southern agricultural area with generally cool days. Now the rainfall totals from now onwards until midnight Friday, probably looking at around still 2 to 5 millimetres for the southern agricultural area, less than 2 millimetres for the northern agricultural area and the west of the state. There is a possibility of some higher totals of 5 to 15 millimetres for the lower southeast, the southern coasts, and also about the southern Mount Lofty Ranges. So it's back to you, Nikolai.
Okay, thanks so much, Tom. Tom Bowick there from the Bureau of Meteorology. Turning to Upper Western, mostly sunny day, winds southwesterly 15 to 20 kilometres, turning southerly 20 to 30 early in the morning. morning. Overnight temperatures will fall between 8 and 11. Daytime temperatures getting back up to between 17 and 23. For lower Western, it'll be partly cloudy, a slight chance of a shower in the far east, near zero chance elsewhere. Winds southwesterly, turning southerly early in the morning. Overnight temperatures, again, getting pretty cold overnight, heading down to between 6 and 9, and daytime temperatures reaching around 17. It's coming up to 12:30.
You're listening to The Country Hour. For more stories from across the country, go to abc.net.au/rural. On ABC Radio Adelaide, South Australia and Broken Hill, this is Nikolai Bailhartz.
Good afternoon and thanks so much for joining us. Today, with the rain falling and the temperatures dropping, it is getting slowly but surely closer to that time to get the winter warmers going food-wise. We'll find out what's coming into season and how farmers have fared, preparing things like the pumpkins and potatoes, getting your roasts and soups cooking. I'd be keen to know whether you have noticed your own shopping trends are starting to change. Are you picking up some more of those wintry foods and wintry vegetables when you head to the shops? We'll talk more about that soon. If you'd like to send us a text, 0467 922 891 is the text number, 0467 922 891. Also today, if you're a gardener, imagine this: picking, planting and weeding. We'll meet the robot that some school students are building that seemingly can do it all. First though, let's find out what's making news with Emma Rebellato. Afternoon, Emma.
Hello, Nikolai. There's a big focus on South Australian roads today, with the federal government announcing it's spending up in tomorrow's budget. The state's North-South Corridor project will get a $2.6 billion boost. There'll be money for the Truro bypass, as well as for Stage 2 of the Augusta Highway duplication. The Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, has made a lightning-quick visit to Afghanistan. Senator Payne says she met Afghanistan's president and discussed the relationship between the two countries in the wake of Australia's military withdrawal. She says they also talked about the government's response to alleged war crimes committed by Australian troops during the war in Afghanistan. And veteran entertainer Bert Newton is recovering in hospital after having part of his leg amputated. The 82-year-old has been in hospital for weeks with complications from a toe infection and had to have surgery on the weekend. His wife Paddy says her husband is in very good spirits. We'll have more news at 1.
Thanks so much, Emma Rebellato, there with news headlines. Now, Emma mentioned a lot of government spending being foreshadowed in the federal budget, which is set to be released tomorrow evening. But farmers, it seems, are on a shopping spree of their own. Good seasonal conditions and strong commodity prices have created an appetite for investment, and a number of government tax incentives have kicked that spending into overdrive. Clint Jasper reports on what farmers are buying.
Demand for machinery is red hot.
We're getting a lot of machinery that's sold before it's even manufactured. There's build slots that we can seize in the system, and that's what we're selling off.
The yard at Agrimac in Ballarat is tellingly sparse. Territory Sales Manager Will DeFagley says a host of federal tax breaks designed to boost investment have supercharged demand.
Farmers generally, they have two lists. They've got a shopping list and a wish list, and because of these government incentives, they've brought their shopping list sales or purchases forward, and they've been able to dig into the wish list, such as, capacity upgrades, incorporating more technology.
Almost 12 months ago, in a bid to stimulate an economy shaken up by coronavirus lockdowns, the federal government expanded the instant asset write-off. The types of businesses that could access the scheme was widened from those with an annual turnover of less than $50 million up to $500 million. And the assets they could buy from $30,000 to $150,000. Then, in the federal budget, the government introduced temporary full expensing, which allowed businesses to fully depreciate an asset in a single tax year. Some small and medium-sized businesses could also use this measure for second-hand assets.
The market's exploded, and we've also seen that reflected into the trade market, where the dealers are just emptying their yards with second-hand machinery. So if you're after a second-hand 120 horsepower tractor with a front end loader, well, forget about it. Either wait 6 months for a new one or wait till maybe the middle of next year and you might be able to find something.
It's not just machinery. At Paradoo Prime in Western Victoria, lamb producer Tim Leeming is busy pregnancy testing his flock of ewes. It's work that can now be carried out day or night, rain, hail or shine, thanks to new undercover sheep yards.
So it's not only very beneficial for the people that are working with the livestock, but it's also really good for the livestock. As you can imagine, you have a concentration of livestock in yards with heaps of rainfall during winter where you get really muddy conditions, and it's not good for stock or the people that are working with them.
The ability to fully depreciate the new yards has allowed Tim Leeming to undertake some significant long-term investments.
They've been a really big incentive for us to invest not just short-term, but with long-term components of our business to make our businesses more efficient.
RSM Australia Associate Director Tracy Dunn says while the government's tax incentives have undoubtedly had the intended effect of boosting investment, she's worried that some may not have considered the full long-term ramifications of using them without proper tax advice.
The measures themselves are quite complex, so from an accountant's perspective, it's proven to be somewhat challenging to work out how the measures actually apply.
When you see all these ads out there opening the rural press on social media urging farmers to, quote, make the most of these measures before the various deadlines shut, does that kind of concern you as a tax professional?
It's very concerning, Clint. The concern comes from the lack of tax expertise that these businesses that are promoting buy assets now make the most of this measure, claim tax deductions. But unless you know exactly the circumstances of that client or that taxpayer, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So it's absolutely essential that any of these business owners that are looking to make purchases, they need to get advice from their tax advisors before going out and purchasing new assets.
As you start gathering all the receipts together to do tax returns this year, can you explain a bit about the complexity from your point of view of working through what these schemes mean for actually filing a business's tax return this year? How much more complex has it made it?
It is extremely complex, Clint. Now, I read tax legislation for fun. I'm not that much of an interesting person. And it took me probably 10 hours solid to work through the explanatory memorandums to get an understanding of how these measures actually work. I've put together for my own benefit a 4-page spreadsheet that steps me through the process because I'd not only have an instant asset write-off, the backing business investment measure and the temporary full expensing of depreciating assets. They come in at different timelines.
That's RSM Australia Senior Partner Tracy Dunn ending Clint Jasper's report. You can check out those new sheep yards that Tim Leeming was talking about on tonight's episode of The Business on ABC TV. That's on at 9:15 tonight. It is 23-1. My name's Nikolai Bailhartz. Well, with the weather we have seen in some parts of the state over the last few days, your mind might be wandering to warming soups and winter roasts. If that's the case, you may be in a little bit of luck with things like potatoes and pumpkins in plentiful supply and some good pricing from a consumer point of view. To find out more about what's in season, we're joined by Penny Reedy, Marketing Communications Manager for the SA Produce Market and also Campaign Manager for Pick a Local, Pick SA. Penny, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me today.
Now, we're getting towards the end of apple season, I gather, but there still is an important variety coming through at the end.
Absolutely. The Pink Lady is always the last one that gets picked for the season. So we've had lots of varieties being picked this year. You'll see Bravos, Kansies, Red Love. There's a massive variety of apples on the shelves this season. But the Pink Lady is actually the most popular in South Australia and they're the last one to be picked. So Pink Ladies that you're picking up in the store have probably been picked about 24 to 48 hours before and fresh off the tree.
And in relatively good supply?
Yeah, great supply of apples this year. We haven't had any hailstorm damage. We haven't had any bushfires so far. So we're doing good on the supply for apples for the new season this year.
And as apples start to make their way out, other fruits decide to come in as well. And citrus season is almost here, pretty much here.
Yeah, so as we finish picking the apples, obviously we have supply of apples. They go into store and we'll have them for the rest of the year. But fresh off the tree, you'll start to see the citrus coming in from the Riverland. So last week we saw the first of the navels, and the mandarins have started to arrive on the market floor. And I spoke to Citrus SA, and they said the cool summer has resulted in great colour and flavour on the fruit this season. So look out for them coming through in your stores. The greatest way that we can support our growers, they've had some challenges this year with pickers and COVID, etc., is to head into a store and pick yourself up a kilo of South Australian grown oranges.
And we are seeing a fair bit of interest, I think, in mandarins. That seem to be getting more popular as time goes on.
Yeah, they're a great variety, and people still think that they have seeds in them, but generally they don't. But I think we kind of bite into it and just expect there to be seeds. But most of the varieties don't have very minimal seeds. You'll be lucky to have 1 or 2 seeds in your mandarins. But yeah, they're great for lunch boxes. They're easy for kids to peel. A great one to take to work. Oranges, you kind of enjoy them a bit more at home because they're a bit messier. But mandarins are great for on the move.
Yeah, I was about to say too, that easy peel aspect has been, I know, something the industry's been looking at for quite a while now, and an interesting kind of consumer reaction where consumers have said, oh, well, if it was a bit easier, maybe we'd buy more, and growers have figured out a way to do it.
Yeah. So the mandarins, we're looking forward to them coming into season. It'll be great to get some citrus back into us. Great vitamin C booster for the cold weather, and like rain today, it's when we start thinking about boosting our vitamin C, isn't it?
Yeah, and an interesting one that's around as well, given that we've just been talking about a couple of different varieties of citrus and a couple of different varieties of apples. Pineapples. Now, I must admit my complete ignorance. Pineapples is one crop that I just go, well, it's just a pineapple. There's just one kind, but that's not the case.
No, there's lots of different varieties of pineapples. So my favourite variety, obviously we don't grow them in South Australia. They come down from Queensland, but there's a massive supply of them at the moment. And there's a variety called the Boto. So a lot of pineapples are kind of stocked on the shelves in their boxes, so you'll be able to see the variety. But the Boto is actually hand-picked by the farmer up in Queensland. It's a premium pineapple. And look out for them. They're very, very sweet. And the trick with eating pineapples is they're sweetest at the bottom of the fruit. So if you want to get the best slice out of the pineapple, take the bottom of it, because all the juices and the sweetness goes to the bottom of it. And there's also a variety called the Festival, which actually has a tinge of coconut flavour. So have a look out for that one.
And kiwi fruit too are on the way.
Yeah, great to see kiwi fruit coming in as well. Obviously not grown in South Australia either. They come from Victoria and, of course, from New Zealand. So the new season of them will be hitting the shelves with really good supply. Best supply will be kind of June, but you will start to see them filter through.
And if we move from the sweet side of things to the savoury, and one of the poor maligned vegetables that suffers from sometimes people kind of cast it aside, but the Brussels sprout, which I must admit I actually quite like.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I sit on the other side. But, they're very good for you. They're grown in South Australia. They're from the Adelaide Hills. And apparently the season's tasting really great this year. So we'll give them a plug because, there's the green variety, which we all know. But look how also they call it the red variety. I think it looks a little bit more purple. But, yeah, South Australian grown Brussels sprouts are available. And as we get colder weather, I guess we're looking at roasts and soups and stuff like that. So plenty of Brussels sprouts around to go into your roast. And if you're making soups, look out for pumpkins because there's a really big supply of them at the moment. You'll find them at a really sharp price in your stores. So I actually made butternut pumpkin soup over the weekend. It's great for cold weather cooking.
Yeah, perfect timing for right now, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And also if we're talking kind of roast, there's plenty of sweet potatoes around as well. So they're great for sweet potato fries and putting into your soups and your roasts and stuff like that. So there's plenty of those kind of root vegetables around, which is good to see.
And if people are looking for stir fries too, some of the Asian greens are pretty cheap.
Yeah, Asian greens are in good supply at the moment. The bok choy, I've seen a lot of bok choy around the market. So, you can match that with your pineapples as well. It's great to chuck a bit of pineapple into your stir fry. So bok choy and pineapple stir fry, give that one a crack.
And speaking of being around the markets, there's a tour on, is that right?
Yeah, so the South Australian produce market, which is the hub of supply of fruit and vegetables in South Australia, we are not open to the public, but we are holding an event next week on the morning of the 18th of May where we've invited chefs and cooks and media and people in the food industry to come in and do a market tour and meet some of the growers that are here and have a look at the varieties that are available. So a bit of a unique experience because we don't open the doors up to the public, and but for those that are working in the industry or, have a reason to be buying fresh produce, we said, let's open it up and let them come in and have a look around. So we're quite looking forward to that.
And hopefully we'll send Cassie along and hear a little bit more about that soon.
Yeah, so Cassie said she's coming along, so hopefully she'll enjoy that. We'll introduce her to some of the growers and she can get to see where all the hive of activity happens here at the produce markets.
Well, no doubt we'll hear more about that soon. Penny Reedy, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Great, thanks for having me.
Penny Reedy, Marketing Communications Manager for the SA Produce Market and Campaign Manager for Pick a Local, Pick SA.
This is ABC Radio Adelaide, South Australia and Broken Hill.
Now, if you're a keen gardener or a farmer, this should sound pretty enticing, I reckon. A farm bot that can automatically plant, weed and pick fruits and vegetables. It's one of the latest ag technologies that students at Loxton High School in the Riverland will have access to. The farm bot is hoped to expose students to emerging agricultural industries and showcase some of the diversities of careers in the industry. Students Aglia Telos and Cohen Seraphin are excited to program the new bot.
Well, it's a FarmBot Genesis XL. It pretty much can plant your fruit, vegetables, anything. It knows, it can detect which one it is, water it to how much it needs. It can remove weeds all on its own with a camera.
And will you be building it?
Well, the robotics team at school here is building it during their classes. So hopefully they can build it in time before the end of the year.
How exciting is it to have this here available to you?
It's extremely exciting. It's a very big deal that not every school has one of these, and we're probably one of the only ones in the Riverland that has it.
And it's not just the students that are excited about the new FarmBot. Ag teacher Justin Fogden believes it's an important opportunity for students and the region.
So we're very fortunate to get some grant funding, and we're going to put up a state-of-the-art industry best practice greenhouse, and in that we've purchased a FarmBot from America, which is a robotic vegetable garden which plants, fertilises, weeds and waters all at once. The kids will program it to do that. So that's 6 metres by 3 metres. And then we're going to set up some different hydroponic setups so that we can grow leafy green vegetables under hydroponics and fruits such as strawberries.
Exposing students to this new technology, how important is it and what are you hoping this will achieve?
So it's about showcasing here at school what's happening in industry, and there's a real push towards water saving and using technology to make things easier. Also growing a lot more produce in a smaller space. So we've got lots of enterprises on the ag block which are more traditional. So yeah, we're really excited to be introducing something which is a little bit more high tech and modern.
How important is it to expose agriculture to students at a young age, and what does the situation here in the Riverland currently look like?
It's really important. There's less and less children coming to school from an agricultural background. So it's about exposing kids that do have a background to some new things and helping them to understand their own enterprises that they have. But it's also about bringing children that don't have access to a family farm or property into agriculture. There's such a huge range of jobs and some amazing opportunities in the Riverland, but also all over the world for kids that are keen. So I guess it's teaching kids that there's so many different things out there. It's highly scientific, but it's highly practical, and it's giving kids a really wide range of skills so that they can make choices within their career. Like they may end up doing major research for something like the CSIRO. They might end up being a farmhand on a local property. So there's just such a wide range of career opportunities for kids, and exposing them will hopefully help the local region as well.
What does that mean for you as an ag teacher to be able to show them the diversity of agriculture, but now also, I guess, the new and developing technologies?
It keeps me very busy, but it also allows the kids to be involved in projects from the ground up and to be monitoring and making money out of our different enterprises so we can reinvest that money back in to the ag block for future projects. So yeah, I already have a list of things after the greenhouse is finished that potentially we can do as well.
That is Justin Fogden, agriculture teacher at Loxton High School, speaking there with Jessica Schrimmer. It's 11 to 1. My name's Nikolai Balehartz. Now, a number of women are banding together to start a campaign that's being launched today to try and champion the wool industry. Wool has had some bad publicity in recent years, mainly from animal welfare groups raising concerns about mulesing and abuse in shearing sheds. But two women are hoping to play a part in changing public perceptions, as David Claughton reports.
I'm Penny, the lady behind Lady Kate Knitwear. I grew up here in New South Wales on a fine merino wool growing property. Australia is renowned for producing the most beautiful merino wool in the world, but there's a whole generation of women that have never felt the luxury of wool on their skin. I started a knitwear label because I want a new generation of women to fall in love.
Penny Ashby, farmer and creator of the Lady Kate fashion label. She's working with wool grower and podcaster Sky Manson on a podcast project called Women Behind Wool.
It came about because I have so many female customers in the cities that I think don't know much about the Australian merino wool industry, and I think they would really relate to a lot of the grassroots stories and a lot of the people within the industry. But generally what makes it into the news and makes it into their world, they're bad news stories, often propagated by, I guess, bodies that have a certain
animal welfare
agenda.
groups, mainly in the last few years.
Potentially, yeah, exactly.
Welfare groups like Animals Australia, the Humane Society and PETA have all targeted the wool industry.
In 2018, an eyewitness worked on a sheep farm in Australia, the world's top wool exporter, and found that the farm manager and workers were systematically mutilating terrified lambs as if they were unfeeling objects on an assembly line. Workers cut and burned the tails off lambs held in tight metal restraints, causing them to writhe in pain.
Wool growers have been forced to change some of their practices, and now 70% of farmers use pain relief when handling sheep. The industry recently launched two new campaigns, one to build trust in Australian wool globally, the other a sustainability platform to highlight the measures in place already to ensure the industry is ethical and good for the planet. The question is, will consumers be convinced enough to abandon cheaper artificial fibres and turn back to embrace a natural fibre and a once great Australian industry?
Wouldn't it be amazing if Australian women were passionate advocates for merino wool? If they asked their favourite stores to use Australian wool in their knitwear? If they dressed their husbands and children only in wool? And if they went around the world proudly telling their friends what a beautiful fibre we grow in Australia? That's my dream.
While trust has been dented, there are some great things going for the wool industry. The sheep can roam on open grasslands. They live a full life producing wool before slaughter. And it's an industry dominated by small Australian-owned family businesses. And women are playing an increasingly bigger role.
I'm Liz. We run merinos on our family farm and we grew your clothes.
I'm Bernie. My husband and I grow merinos on our farm in Young, New South Wales, and I grew your clothes.
I'm Rachel and I run merinos and I grew your clothes. Actually, they grew your clothes. My merino ewes run on rain, sunshine and grass.
There's no synthetic fibres here.
Merino wool is a renewable fibre. Every year we bring the sheep into the shed and shear them and then let them back out for a feed.
So when you buy Australian merino wool, you know you're supporting families like mine.
Like mine.
And like ours.
Ultimately, the project is about bridging the city-country divide, highlighting the incredible women in the game and turning customers into brand ambassadors.
It's interesting when you talk to women who are on farms, you get a really mixed response. Like a lot of them say, "Oh, I don't do anything with the farm. That's my husband's business." And then you sort of dig a bit deeper and you find that actually they do the bookwork. They're out mustering on weekends. They're discussing the business decisions with their husbands every night. Plus, they're raising the family and marketing the wool and doing whatever else. So that role is huge, and it needs to be recognised.
And yet, Sky, it is really challenging, isn't it? Because you would have reported on a lot of those animal welfare issues. How possible will it be? What will it take to change people's perception of wool as a product and as an industry?
I don't see it as challenging at all because the stories are so wonderful and everybody is so willing to tell them, and they care for their animals and they're so deeply ingrained in what they do. And once you can give an insight into that through what we're doing, so short films and podcasts, then people will understand. And I think now, more than ever, and this has been driven by COVID and people who are wanting to buy local and get their products from Australians, people are just craving more knowledge and more connection.
So will it make a difference? Penny Ashby hopes so.
If this campaign encourages people to go into their favourite stores or the high street chains and ask them if the wool they're using is Australian merino wool, or if they could use wool instead of the synthetics or the other blends that they've chosen, then that helps secure the future of the industry, and that's really what we want at the end of the day.
That's Penny Ashby, and we also heard from former ABC reporter and now wool grower Sky Manson. They were speaking with David Claughton. 5-1, my name's Nikolai Balehartz. Now let's talk agri-tech, which is shorthand for agricultural technologies. It's been a bit of a buzzword lately amongst farmers, and it's certainly been the case at Beef Australia, that huge beef conference in Queensland, where it was pretty much the name of the game. At the Pitch in the Paddock, entrepreneurs were given a chance to win $10,000 to bring their ideas to life. Alex McCauley is the CEO of Startup Oz, a national advocacy group for startups. He was one of the judges and told Kelly Buchanan it's a new way to try and bring farmers and technologists together.
I've been totally blown away, honestly. I came up to beef sort of thinking it's going to be about cattle, and honestly, it's half about tech. It's really obvious that tech is going to play a huge part in the success of this industry and agriculture more broadly over the next few years.
Agriculture has been steadily embracing tech and recognising that in and of themselves as an industry. Do you think the tech industry is embracing the role they'll be playing in agriculture? Is that forefront of mind for some of those startups?
Yeah, I think over the last few years in particular in Australia, the conversation's really matured around what tech can do, not just for the tech industry itself, but for other industries right across the economy. So increasingly, I think tech companies are seeing themselves as kind of infrastructure players that are really boosting productivity for established industries, and particularly really important Australian industries like ag. What are the new frontiers in tech that you could see having some application in this industry? We had 9 amazing startups pitched to us at a Pitch in the Paddock competition yesterday where I was one of the judges, and we had everything from new innovative pig traps to help control feral pigs, a different sort of castration knife to help keep farmers safe while they're doing the castration process, right through to the company that won, which is building an AI-based analytics platform using data collected on farm to help producers make better decisions and produce better yields. So everything from what you'd call kind of old school tech that's making a difference right through to the really digital stuff that's going to really lift productivity across the board. What set that winner apart for you as a judge? Honestly, the pitch was, we had 9 really excellent entrepreneurs, and these guys, Emma and Shannon from Black Box AI, they just were so polished. They'd obviously, they're building their tech internally. They've got a team of 4 developers. They've just been out and raised some capital, and mostly they've raised capital from customers, which is always a really good sign when your customers want to invest in your business. And they're solving problems at scale. They're they're helping farmers make better decisions based on the data that they collect on farm. So that's just a really important bit of technology for the industry. If you are a farmer who has a problem to solve and you think tech could help you but you don't really know much about it, and maybe you're still using the old back of the envelope and a pen to keep track of things in the paddock, how do you find the people to maybe take your idea and turn it into a product that
the industry can benefit from?
Yeah, that's really hard. I think it's hard for people broadly, and it's even harder if you're on farm and you've got your hands full, producing. Come to Beef Week, I reckon. That's a good start. There's a huge tech focus here. There's a tech yards down the other end of the showgrounds, absolutely chock full of people building tech products for ag and for beef in particular. I think this is a space where there's a huge bit of momentum and lots more people getting involved. I think one of the really big challenges for the producers of the technology is that ag is often a very sort of dispersed industry where there are lots of smaller and bigger players right across the country. So it's actually kind of hard to get your products in people's hands, even if they're really good products that are making a big difference. And so bringing everyone together like this makes a big difference.
That's Alex McCauley from Startup Oz. Now let's find out what's coming up on Afternoons with Sonia Feldhoff. Afternoon, Sonia.
Hello, Nikolai. Well, did you know that South Australia has gone from amongst the highest power prices in the country, wholesale prices, to the lowest? But why you're not really going to benefit too much from that, you'll find that out after 1 o'clock today. All the bottom lips out with Nikolai now. And also, when it comes to your sheets, I don't know if you've checked out the ABC Facebook page, but lots of people have been questioning whether you value a top sheet or not. We're going to ask you how often you change your sheets in Who Are You South Australia. Are you a weekly, fortnightly, monthly or more person? Oh, he's not confessing anything here.
Not saying anything. That and plenty more with Sonia Feldhoff.